Good morning or afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. It's a pleasure to be with you this week as we turn our focus to Psalm 67. As I was just saying before I pressed record, Psalm 67 is a relatively short psalm, uh, but I think it's when you have a short psalm, the power of the meaning of those words becomes even more important, and we have to think about uh, the going deep into each of the words of the psalm, especially, and I put in the commentary, especially the different words that the psalm uses for for the nations of the world. The psalm uses three different words for that, and I did bring one commentary that explained that difference. A lot of this is Psalms in Hebrew and comparative translations, and one thing that I think it's important to note is whether the translations also try to translate those terms differently, or if they flatten all of the differences and just prefer to translate all of those different words as nations or peoples of the world, right? I think that there's a we want to the translators should try, if the same thing is being referred to by different words, translators should try to translate in different words, at least in that psalm, so that you can tell that the Hebrew isn't all the same. So we'll talk about that. As with usual, our first reading of the psalm, before we get into the content and what it means, and the first reading of the psalm is for a sense of the emotional impact of the psalm. What rises up in you when you read it? How does it make you feel? And what do you think the mindset of the psalmist was when the psalmist wrote this psalm? So we'll jump right in. La menatzeach bin ginot mizmor shir.
I don't have it.
Elohim. Oh yes, I forgot to share the screen. One sec.
Um,
Okay. Yes. And I did send out the source sheet. Okay, let's see. We'll do page width. All right. We'll take that again. La menatzeach bin ginot mizmor shir. Elohim yechonenu vivarchenu yaer panav itanu sela. Ladat ba'aretz darkecha, bechol goyim yeshuatecha, yoducha amim Elohim, yoducha amim kulam. Yismechu v'yiranenu le'umim, ki tishpot amim miyosher, ulumim ba'aretz tanchem sela. Yoducha amim Elohim, yoducha amim kulam. Eretz natna yevula, yevarchenu Elohim Eloheinu. Yivarchenu Elohim v'yiru oto kol afsei aretz. So we can read a bunch of different translations because it's really short. For the leader, with instrumental music, a psalm, a song. May God be gracious to us and bless us, showing us favor, Selah, that your way be known on earth, your deliverance among all nations. Peoples will praise you, God. All peoples will praise you. Nations will exult and shout for joy, for you rule the peoples with equity. You guide the nations of the earth. Selah. The peoples will praise you, O God. All peoples will praise you. May the earth yield its produce. May God, our God, bless us. May God bless us and be revered to the ends of the earth. All right, here's the King James Version. To the chief musician on Niginot, a psalm or song. God be merciful unto us and bless us and cause his face to shine upon us, Selah. That thy way may be known upon the earth, thy saving health among all nations. Let the people praise thee, O God. Let all the people praise thee. Oh, let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for thou shalt judge the people righteously and govern the nations of the earth, of the nations upon earth. Selah. Let the people praise thee, O God. Let all the people praise thee. Then shall the earth yield her increase, and God, even our own God, shall bless us. God shall bless us, and all the ends of the earth shall fear him. Here's the contemporary English version. A psalm and a song for the music leader, used with stringed instruments. Tell the nations to praise God. Tell the nations to praise God is not part of the psalm. It's just a title. The contemporary English version likes to add titles to the psalms. It's just their version of a title. I I'm like sometimes I think maybe I shouldn't put it in, but in some sense it's sort of like what they call the psalm, what their title is, gives some sense of what they think the main theme of the psalm is. So I leave it in. But it's important to note that that's not part of the psalm. Larry.
Rabbi, this contemporary English version is really a paraphrase. It's almost like the Phillips thing. The NIV is a more accurate used by more of the
Yeah,
Christians.
yeah, yeah. I have the international version also.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's really the one that's the contemporary. This one is just an oddball.
Yeah, it is. It is. I have it in part because it's a paraphrase.
Ah,
Because what they're doing, they're not trying to translate literally. They're trying to give their version of the sense of the psalm in what you might call colloquial English, like uh what you might like I don't know, religious school language or something. I don't know. It's
that's why no one uses it.
yeah, right. I totally hear that. But in the context of comparative translations, how they have chosen to do it is kind of interesting.
Okay.
I mean, look, yeah, it is less of a scholarly translation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that scholars weren't involved in doing it. Our
Rabbi,
God, be kind and bless us, be pleased and smile. Then everyone on earth will learn to follow you, and all nations will see your power to save us. Make everyone praise you and shout your praises. Let the nations celebrate with joyful songs, because you judge fairly and guide all nations. Make everyone praise you, God, and shout your praises. Our God has blessed the earth with a wonderful harvest. Pray for his blessings to continue and for everyone on earth to worship our God. And on the left, on this same page, I put the Rashi Ketuvim. And again, like the contemporary English version, Rabbi Shraga Silverstein here is not trying to do a direct translation of what the words in their original context means. He is trying to do a translation that incorporates the interpretation of Rashi into the text so that so that the translation is consistent with Rashi's 11th century understanding of the words. Now, is that the same as just giving a paraphrase? No. But the reason why I have these paired is because it also is not trying to do a direct translation. For the conductor of the singing, a psalm, a song. O God, be gracious to us and bless us. Let your countenance shine upon us always to give us dew and rain, so that your ways to bestow good upon your people be known in the land, and your salvation among all the nations. Then peoples will praise you, O God. Then all the nations will praise you. The nations will be happy and rejoice when you judge the peoples justly for merit, and when you lead the nations in the land on a just path always. Peoples will praise you, O God, all the peoples will praise you. And they will praise you also for the earth's having given forth its produce, and for God's having blessed us, our God. God will bless us, and all the ends of the earth will fear him, saying, see how God has blessed and aggrandized those who feared him. All right. So first reactions. What emotions are present in this psalm? Uh, yeah, what Alba?
Yeah. Hey, just to kind of like clarify a little bit of vocabulary, Selah, I've heard, I think from you and from several other persons that that's like time for the refrain. You know, there's like a poem and then there's the refrain and then there's the poem, then there's the refrain, you know. And Selah was also the idea of at that moment the musicians were supposed to take over. I'm not sure. What is the purpose of the, since this is a song and it says it's a song, does the Selah mean that everybody stop talking now and the strings are going to go, you know, take a riff?
Yeah, so the short answer is we don't know.
Oh, well, that's done. That helps.
What we do know is this. We know that the word Sela, it has the effect of providing emphasis, and it has the effect of separating the psalm into sections,
Right.
right? It is it is
Hmm.
fair to say, okay, the part before the first Sela, and then the part between the Selas, and then the part after the Sela. Okay? So
Right.
this psalm can be divided into three parts. Uh,
Okay.
so
So,
we know
mhm.
for
Go ahead.
sure that Sela is for emphasis, and we know that it provides a break. Because of those things, and we know that the word Sela doesn't have any like content meaning. There's no way to translate that word. Some translations simply leave it off. I think that is also not a very good idea. And some translations, uh, a lot of translations include it, but just write Sela, right? That is, there's no way to translate that word. It is a word without content. Because it is a word without a literal meaning, and because we know that its effect is for emphasis and to separate the psalm into chunks, it has been theorized by many scholars, both of the things that you've said. That is, it has been theorized by many scholars that Sela is actually a musical notation, that that the word is there in order to be a cue for for an instrumental part of the musicality of the psalm, which was your second thing. And the first thing that you said was with regard to the refrain, and I would say it a little differently. It isn't that the Sela marks a refrain, it's that the Sela marks an an emphasis or a break in the psalm in the same way that a refrain does. So this psalm actually has both the Sela twice and a refrain. That is,
Mhm.
verse 4 and verse 6 are the same verse. And so we actually have a repetition of one verse, which is right this Yoducha Amim Elohim, Yoducha Amim Kulam, Yoducha Amim Elohim, Yoducha Amim Kulam. So this psalm has both a repeated verse and the Sela, and I think what the effect of that is, in fact, it's actually really interesting, right? Because if you look at the structure of the psalm, you have the what's it called, the pre-psalm verse, whatever, the section of the psalm that gives you the invocation or the musical notes or whatever. In this case, that it's a psalm meant to be played on stringed instruments or bingi note, right? And that it's a psalm song, okay? A mizmor and a
Mhm.
shir, okay? Then we have one verse before the Sela. It's sort of like as if it was saying, this is the main, this is our opening salvo. This is what we're doing here is we're talking about this idea. Then we have three verses, the middle of which is is going to be repeated later in the psalm. We have three verses, and that closes with another Sela. And then we have three verses. This time it begins with the refrain, right? In the first set of three verses, the repeated verse is the middle verse. And then in the second set of three verses, the refrain is the first set. So I do think that the structure of this psalm, in some ways, does affect the experience of the psalm. The the structure is very tight, right? And
Mhm.
um most of the time I like the Jewish pagination, the Jewish way to mark the numbers of the verses, right? Our we count the this verse Lamanatseach bin Ginot Mizmor Shir as a verse
Mhm.
of the psalm, right? Most Christian translations, I think, following the
Uh,
Greek text, do not consider that to be a part of the psalm, just a superscription, and that the psalm starts in the next verse. In this psalm's case, I actually think this is a seven verse psalm. With like I agree. I sometimes I don't agree. Sometimes I think no, the like that's part of the song. In this case, I actually think it detracts a little bit to think of it as an eight verse psalm because the seven verses I think are an actual crucial part of the emotional and spiritual experience of this psalm. I think it's really crucial that it's seven verses and that it's one followed by two sets of three, and that the middle verse and the first verse of the second group are the same. Like to me, the that helps with the emotional experience of this song. So
mhm.
uh, and I think that if you think of it as an eight verse psalm, then you miss the power of the seven verse structure. So that's just that's a thought. All right. So other
Oh,
emotional,
yeah.
yeah, Alba, go ahead.
To go on from there, I completely agree. You know, Psalm 150, the one that hallelujah, 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 el bizcocho,
Yeah.
has a lot of, the cymbals, let the cymbals play and let the lyres, twang and whatever. This sounds like the introduction to Psalm 150. It's like the build up to it. And the one second. There's another song. I don't know if you guys the Babu Yetu Yetu Hine na na ni na na da di da 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 da. You know that one, Babu Yetu? It was with the what's that? Yu Chin. He wrote it for um civilizations. It's a kind of a web game. Anybody know that one? Yeah? No? Maybe? Okay. Not important. It's the same structure. And so when you're reading this, it was like that whole song of Babu Yetu just like boom came into my head. Plus the idea of this Psalm 67 sounds like to me an introduction. It's so damn short. It sounds like the introduction to something. And it sounds to me like the introduction build up to Psalm 150. Ideas? Or am I totally out in the woods somewhere?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess eventually this class will get to Psalm 150 and we'll be able to talk about it more. But Psalm 150 is the final psalm of the book of Psalms. And
Right.
it also is the closing of a set of several psalms that begin and end with hallelujah. Like the
Hmm.
whole ending set of psalms are a unit. They can't really be understood separate from each other. They go together, which we'll eventually get to I guess in a couple of years when we get there. Yeah, Larry.
This startled me. This psalm. This is the first psalm where instead of speaking about the house of Israel, about the Jewish people, it suddenly opens up everything to all the nations.
Yeah.
Not just that they're going to be looking and noting, but they're participating. They're joining in. That the word is like it's gone out to everybody, and everybody is worshiping God. and they're praising God. And this is verse 6 in the English, the land yielding its harvest. That the harvest, this is like finishing creation, that instead of just everything growing, suddenly the last thing, the last day, Adam, suddenly all mankind has become what God intended in the first place. This is the first one that speaks to that.
That's right. That's right. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that connection of this psalm to a universal to a universal approach, and also of this psalm to the harvest. Um because how this psalm is used liturgically is very deeply connected to that idea. Uh uh yeah, Murray.
Well, my first reaction was that this psalm began with a state of well-being, the emotional state of well-being, of being content, satisfied as a result of the adherence and following uh, Hashem, and the person, the speaker of the psalm, is saying to everyone, and as Larry said, to all the nations, if you do this, follow, praise, etc., all this will result in a well-being.
Good. So the emotional feeling in this psalm is uh well-being, uh comfort, uh joy, uh satisfaction, a sense of being uh bathed in the salvation of God. Nice. All right. Anybody else have a an emotional reaction to this psalm before we keep going? All right. So, our Siddur, the Lev Shalem Siddur, this psalm is used as the psalm for the holiday of Sukkot. Now, that isn't a traditional well, let me say that differently. Traditionally, there isn't a psalm that is labeled this is the psalm for the holiday of Sukkot. Um that is that that hasn't um there's a passage in the Talmud where it describes the psalms for each day of the week and the psalms for certain holidays, and right, psalm for Sukkot that does not appear. But there's a reason why they picked this psalm, and it's because it already was connected to Sukkot, both thematically and liturgically. And we're going to get to how it's used on the holiday of Sukkot. But here's what the Siddur says. Psalm 67 centers on three themes associated with Sukkot. All right, so this is a very short psalm, but it says the three themes that are in this psalm are all deeply connected to the holiday of Sukkot. What are they? Sukkot is a harvest festival. Sukkot is a harvest festival. So this psalm, which describes the power of the harvest, right? The earth gives its yield. The earth has given forth her bounty, right? That is a harvest psalm. And so that first psalm, that first that use. All right. So Sukkot is a harvest festival. The psalm celebrates the fruits of the harvest. And many modern biblical scholars believe that this psalm was recited on Sukkot. The prophet Malachi, who is in the Hebrew scriptures, the final voice of prophecy in the book of prophets, Malachi imagines the peoples of the world coming up to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot. That's one of the Haftarot that we read, one of our passages from prophets that we read on the holiday of Sukkot is the passage that describes Sukkot as being a universal holiday, right? The Judaism imagines Sukkot as being universal because it deals with the harvest, which is for everybody, not just for the Jewish people. And so this psalm, which is so universal in its aspect, which talks about the different nations, right? Rabbinic tradition sees Sukkot as the time when the nations of the world will come to recognize that there is one God whom we all worship. This universal theme is central to this psalm, right? So those are two themes: the harvest and the universality of the oneness of God, the universality of worship of God. All both of those are deeply associated with Sukkot and are deeply present in this psalm. Lastly, Sukkot is called Zman Simchatenu, the time of our joy. And this psalm, the emotional experience of this psalm, the spiritual experience of this psalm is deeply a psalm of celebration, thankfulness, and joy, right? This psalm has, right? Let nations rejoice. Let's all praise God with joy. And that focus on joy is deeply connected with Sukkot. I think that the 7 verses also connect to the holiday of Sukkot. Our our Siddur doesn't mention that, but I think that or one thing that pushes me toward thinking that this psalm was actually originally composed for or deeply connected to the holiday of Sukkot is the 7 verse structure of it, because Sukkot is a 7 day long holiday, and there's something really powerful about these the 7 verses of this psalm being connected to the 7 days of Sukkot. And I'll give one last, also not mentioned in our Siddur. Clearly, the authors of our Siddur, when they picked this psalm to elevate to the status of the psalm for the holiday of Sukkot, they weren't fooling around. They understood that this psalm was deeply connected to Sukkot. But I think one last aspect of it is this first verse, which we call verse 2. May God grant us grace and bless us. May God shine God's face upon us. Selah. Which sounds like, it should sound like, it sounds like the priestly blessing, right? Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, right? Elohim yichonenu v'yivarchenu, Ya'er panav itanu. That is like a paraphrase or a retelling of the priestly blessing. And the priestly blessing from Numbers chapter 6, the priestly blessing is also deeply connected to the holiday of Sukkot, because there was a deep tradition that on the holiday of Sukkot, the priests would bless the people. And even in some congregations to this day, the priests ascend to the bima, to the duchan, to the stage, and they do a practice known as duchaning in Yiddish, but from the word duchan, meaning stage, right? Where the priests go up, the Kohanim go up to the bima, and they cover their heads with a talis, and they recite the priestly blessing in the way that they used to do it also in the temple, right? And we only do that traditionally. In our congregation, we don't do it at all, but traditionally we do that on the holiday, on the pilgrimage festivals, the holidays of Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuot. And so the connection of this psalm to the holiday of Sukkot, it just keeps coming and coming. And I think the way in which this psalm is in fact an interpretation or an expansion of the priestly blessing, I think also also connects to the holiday of Sukkot liturgically. All right, so that's one thing I wanted to share. Now, this psalm is also used in its entirety in the ritual of Kiddush Levana. So if you've never heard of the ritual of Kiddush Levana, it is the blessing uh for the new moon. And the custom is that you can bless the new moon anytime after the third or fourth day of the month, but it's best to bless the new moon. And before the 12th day of the month, but it's best to bless the new moon on Saturday night. So the tradition is before Havdalah or right after Havdalah. I think before Havdalah. I'd have to look it up. The tradition is that if you go to shul on Saturday night and you do Mariv, then you go outside to bless the new moon, and then you come back in to do Havdalah. And the blessing of the new moon involves the recitation of certain psalms, including Psalm 67, and a few other verses that you recite several times over, and then to bless everybody that you're with, like you greet them. And the time to do it is on the first Saturday night of the new month, as long as that first Saturday night is after the third or fourth night since Rosh Chodesh. So
The
it
one
is,
time,
yeah.
the one time that I did it growing up, um, with a friend of Rabbi Spitzer, um, we went to look at the star. We went to see if how many stars there were, and then we prayed, and then we went back down to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right.
Yes, I'm just reiterating what you did.
Yeah. Okay, so that is another place where Psalm 67 is recited, is in that ceremony of blessing the new moon. Some people also recite this psalm in the counting of the Omer, which we do between Pesach and Shavuot. I I would just say that I think that the connection there is another connection to the idea of a harvest, right? Because the Omer is the counting of the first harvest, the barley harvest. The holiday of Sukkot happens at the end of the harvest season when everything has been brought in out of the fields. All of the grapes have been harvested, and all the wheat has been harvested, and all of the everything has been harvested, right? It is a harvest Thanksgiving festivals, Sukkot. But between Pesach and Shavuot, that is the time of the very first harvest, which is the barley harvest. The barley harvest, that's the first thing that comes up and the first thing that is gathered in. And so the barley harvest, the connection of this psalm to the counting of the Omer is a connection to the barley harvest, but also a connection to I think to the expansion of the priestly blessing that is connected with Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So it's not surprising to me that some people include Psalm 67 also in the counting of the Omer, which happens between Passover and Shavuot. In the Idot HaMizrach, that is the Jews from the Levant, Morocco, and Baghdad, in the Idot HaMizrach, the Arab Jews, they use this psalm every day before grace after meals during the ceremony of Mayim Achronim. So Mayim Achronim is a custom where, just like you wash your hands before you eat bread, you should wash your hands at the end of the meal also, which is why it's called Mayim Achronim, the last water, the final water. And there's a tradition that just like you wash your hands before the meal, you wash your hands at the end of the meal. If you do that custom, some folks will recite Psalm 67 as part of that ritual of hand washing. And I did find in one Siddur a note that the Ramah, who's one of the great Ashkenazi medieval sages, um, would include Psalm 67 during the lighting of the Hanukkah candles. Like, so this psalm, it is associated with a lot of our holidays. And that is a really interesting thing because verses from this psalm are not used in our liturgy very much, right? Like, we are not, there are other verses that talk about praising God that we do take, but this psalm, generally, we don't take it and use it in our liturgy. But uh, but we do use it as a whole chunk. And when we use it as a whole chunk, the psalm in its entirety is mostly related to holidays. Now, we do sometimes split it up, and that is on Simchat Torah, which is the ending of the holiday of Sukkot. When we walk around, when we dance with the Torahs around the room, 7 times, right? Again, 7 verses in this psalm, 7 days of Sukkot, 7 hakafot. 7 times we circle the sanctuary with our dancing of the Siddur. I mean of the Torah, and the entire psalm in the Sephard tradition is used but split into the 7 verses. The after the first hakafa, you do verses 1 and 2, because really, that is to say, 1 and 2 by our pagination, because really verse 1 is just a title. So you read the title and the first verse after the first hakafa, right? So the Sfard tradition, which we do not use in our synagogue, but the what it does is it takes all of Psalm 67 and divides it into these 7 verses. And then it takes most of Psalm 19, which is also deeply associated with Torah, right? And we've talked about Psalm 19. Psalm 19 is the one that talks about how the Torah of God is pure, the teachings of God are more precious than honeycombs, right? We've talked about Psalm 19 before, right? So it breaks up Psalm Psalm 67, it breaks up Psalm 19, it breaks up Psalm 29, which is the one that talks about a God as being like the voice of God at Sinai. And there's a deep connection between this psalm and Revelation, right? So Psalm 29 is a psalm that describes God at Sinai. And so the effect of doing this is that over the course of the 7 hakafot, you read the entirety of Psalm 67 and the entirety of Psalm 29 and most of Psalm 19 and then other verses from Psalms. And I brought them all so that you can see how this is done, because I think it's really beautiful. And maybe we'll do it next year if I remember. We can include this as part of our experience of the Hakafot next year. Well, so here in the first one, you read Psalm 19 verses 1 through 8, right? Psalm 29 verses 1 through 3. This is sort of like the setting the stage, right? Psalm 67 verses 1 and 2. And then Psalm 89, which is Psalm 89:3, which is Olam Chesed Yibaneh. The world is built on love or loving kindness, or Chesed, covenantal love, right? So, and I think that's the theme of this idea, is that the world is built on covenantal love. Not the Jewish people, but the world is a universal message. The so and then in the second Hakafa, you read a section from Psalm 19 verse 8, right? So we had gotten up to Psalm 19 verse 8 as we were reading in the first one, but we only read the first phrase of verse 8. Verse 8 has multiple phrases, so we're Torat Adonai Temima Meshivat Nafesh, and then in the second verse we pick up Edut Adonai Ne'emana Makimat Peti, right? Okay, so we read the second half of Psalm 19 verse 8, and then we read the fourth verse of Psalm 29, the voice of the Lord, Kol Adonai Bakoach, right? We read uh our psalm, the third verse of our psalm, which is really the second verse. Okay. And then uh another verse from Psalm 89, right, about God's strong right arm being exalted. And then in the next hakafa, we read the the next phrase from Psalm 19 and the next verse of Psalm 29, or the next phrase of Psalm 29, and then verse 4 of Psalm 67. That's the next verse. And then a verse from the book of Micah about, again, about loving kindness, right? Emet li'Yaakov, chesed la'Avraham. Okay. And then in the next hakafa, that you pick up the next section from Psalm 19, the next section from Psalm 29, the next verse from Psalm 67, and then a verse from Psalm 16. Psalm 16 is the one that describes a righteous person who is accepted into God's house, right? That's Psalm 16. Your benevolent righteousness, may you always bestow them. Delights are ever in your right hand. And then at the next hakafa, you read the next verse of Psalm 19, the next verse of Psalm 29, the next verse of Psalm 67, and then a verse from Psalm 8, which is Adonai Adonenu Ma'adir Shimcha Bechol Haaretz, which when we talked about Psalm 8, we talked about how that psalm is deeply connected to the idea of revelation, deeply connected to the festivals, and is quoted in our festival Amidah, in the Musaf service for the festival Amidah. So it's not surprising that it would be included in the Hakafot on Simchat Torah. And then we have the sixth Hakafa, where you read another verse from Psalm 19, the next verse from Psalm 29, the next verse from Psalm 67, and then a verse from Psalm 145. Psalm 145 is Ashrei. Okay, so that is going back to what Alba suggested, that this psalm is connected to the closing of the book of Psalms, right? Psalm 145 is the beginning of that closing section of the book of Psalms. And again, it has to do with God's chesed and God's goodness and God's graciousness, not just to the Jewish people, but to all of God's works, to the entirety of creation. It's a very universalist approach. And then finally, in the seventh hakafa, the seventh time we go around the sanctuary, we read the next verse from Psalm 19, the final verses of Psalm 29, the final verse of our psalm, and then a prayer. This is not actually a verse from Psalms. It's a prayer. Shavatenu kabel ushma tzakatenu yodea talumot. Right? It is a prayer that God will accept our prayer. And I think the idea is that God will accept the whole marching around, right? And it's just so interesting to see how these psalms are spliced together. The psalms are spliced together in such a way that even the psalms that do seem to be very particularist, that are about God's unique relationship with the Jewish people, like Psalm 19, which is really about God's Torah that God gave to the Jewish people, and Psalm 29, which is about the revelation of God at Sinai, right, to the Jewish people, right? Those psalms, because they've been interspersed with Psalm 67, have now taken on in the holiday of Sukkot and in this in the Hakafot, they've taken on a more universalist bent, and I think that's intentional. I think that's what this is trying to do. Now, uh, I have talked about before about the tension between particularism and universalism within Judaism, and I'm a particularist kind of guy. I think that the relationship that God has with the Jewish people is special, and that's part of what it means to be connected to the covenant, is to be connected with this particular connection to God. And we are a particularist people with a universalist message. We have something that we can teach the nations, and there are definitely voices in our tradition that are deeply concerned with the universal. And certainly the holiday of Sukkot is a holiday which connects that tension really very powerfully. Larry,
I'm a universalist.
I know you are.
I'm out there doing it. I'm trying to teach the Goyim Judaism.
I know you are.
That's
I
the
know you
best
are.
way I can
But
say
see,
it.
I think that this setup is perfect for someone like you.
Yes.
Maybe you can also incorporate Psalms
That's why I'm
19
so
and
excited
29
by
and
this psalm.
67.
This psalm
Yeah.
is wonderful. And your teaching of it, your unfolding, showing how it unfolds. And that the holiday is not just a holiday, it's holiday. It's holy day for everybody. This is the culmination of what God's purpose is.
Yeah,
A huge
I definitely think
Judaism.
there's something to that, right?
Yeah.
I spoke about it on the holiday of Sukkot this year, but uh, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out in his commentary on the holiday of Sukkot uh, that Sukkot is connected both to a cycle of particularist holidays, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, which talk about the specific history of the Jewish people as it relates to their relationship with God. That's the connection of the holiday of Sukkot to wandering in the desert, right? In the same way that Passover is about the splitting of the sea and Shavuot is about Sinai, right? Sukkot is about wandering in the desert and eventually coming into the land of Israel, right? So that's the particularist aspect. But holiday of Sukkot is also part of the seventh month, and the seventh month, according to Jonathan Sachs, like the seventh day, like the is not just for the Jews. It is a universalist. It is the entire world is judged, right? On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's not just Jews that are receiving judgment. It is Kol Ba'ei Olam Yavrun, right? All of the nations of the world, everybody is judged on Yom Kippur for being written in the book in the book of life, or not being written in the book of life, and we're judged on the holiday of Sukkot for rain, whether we're going to have a bountiful harvest. That happens on the holiday of Sukkot. It's not just for the Jewish people; it's the entire nations of the world, which is why says the Talmud. That's why 70 bulls were offered up on the holiday of Sukkot, one for each of the nations of the world, right? That there are 70 nations according to our tradition. I mean, there are more than 70 nations, but the Torah imagined 70 was it sort of the number that expressed universalism, right? That's 7 times 10. 7 is a universal number, 10 is the universal number, 70 nations of the world, 70 languages, 70 nations, 70 ways of looking at the Torah, right? all of those aspects are connected to this universal idea. And so Sukkot represents the intersection or the productive tension between the particularist story and the universalist story, which is why we have two sets of symbols that are actually kind of mutually exclusive, right? We shake the lulav and the etrog and we pray for rain, but we sit in the sukkah, which is outside, so we don't want it to rain. And and so sitting in the sukkah is the particularist message of these are the booths that our people wandered in. And the shaking of the lulav and the etrog is the universalist message that the rain is for the whole world, that the rain is for everybody. And so Sukkot is a holiday which balances these two productive tensions within Judaism of the universalist and the particularist. So we'll close. Oh, I did want to. Well, you can read the section about the difference between goyim and amim and leumim, which connects very deeply to this conversation, because it. Well, I'll read it. There are many Hebrew words for nation. Our psalm uses three of them. In verse 3, it refers to goyim. In verse 4, twice to amim, and then in verse 5 to leumim. English translations typically ignore the subtle distinctions that exist between these three terms and translate all three as nations or peoples. Many commentators insist that these terms are not at all synonymous. The Malbim, for example, maintains that the word goyim refers to loosely organized groups of people, right? You might call that primitive tribes or something, right? They are capable, as verse 3 has it, of experiencing and knowing God's salvation, but are not sufficiently cohesive to respond in unison to that salvation. They are deficient in the language of praise. They feel God's salvation, but cannot articulate their response. For Malbim, the term Amim of verse 4 refers to a group of people who are better organized. They are led by a common ruler, a sovereign king. They can articulate their experience of salvation. They know the language of praise, but they are still primitive. They are not yet able to move beyond mere verbal praise to more communicative modalities of expression. They cannot effectively convey the religious message to others. Only in verse 5, writes Malbim, does the psalmist describe leumim, civilizations, which possess a distinct and highly developed culture, one which enables them to rejoice and break into song. Only the more intellectually advanced leumim can appreciate that God judges all the peoples with equity and guides the nations of the earth. Only they can communicate their religious discoveries to the rest of the world. Malbim keeps us aware of the difference between different national groups and the degree to which they differ from each other. Some are better than others to integrate their religious experiences into their cultural consciousness. He forces us to confront ourselves with a difficult question. How verbally prepared are we to express our religious experiences? Are we at the first level, barely able to sense something numinous, but not even able to put it in our experience into words? Or can we at least find words of praise by which to thank God for God's blessings? But are we incapable of being the light unto the nations, which is our mission? Or ideally, is our language up to the task where we can fully express the religious message in our emotions, in our songs, and in our way of life, so that others will look up to us and become inspired to follow our example? The best proofs that we have advanced to the latter level are the Psalms themselves. Without fail, each and every psalm advances to a level of literary excellence that testifies that we, the people of the Psalms, have progressed beyond the stages of Goyim and Amim. We have attained the stage of Leumim. We are indeed a civilization capable of bringing the message of the Almighty to all humanity. May God bless us, and may all the ends of the earth be
Amen.
in awe of God.
Amen.
All right.
Wonderful.
So
Thank you.
we'll close with that.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Marvelous.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for coming this week. And I hope you'll join us again next Tuesday, same time, 10 a.m. Just a note from a logistical perspective that the following Tuesday, November 11th, which is Veterans Day, usually I would have no problem meeting, but it turns out that all three of my kids are. Are off from school because of Veterans Day. And so I'm going to switch my day off from Monday to Tuesday that week. And so we will not be having our class on Tuesday the 11th, so that I can hang out with my kids and my sister who's coming to visit. And so that will so we will not meet in 2 weeks, but we will meet next week.
Thank you,
In
Rabbi.
Yeah, Alba.
the United States today, I don't know because I haven't been there for 36 years. But when I was a kid on November 11th, we always went to the cemetery and, cleaned it up, put new rocks on top
Mhm.
of stuff
Put
and
flags
stuff like
out.
that. Yeah, the flags, my mother and her suitcase full of flags. Do you guys still do that?
Yeah, people do that.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
poppies? I think I remember poppies because my grandfather was in World War
Yeah,
One.
poppies are very much associated with World War One and with the veterans of World War One. No question.
Right.
I don't think that we put poppies on.
Out anymore.
Generally, in Judaism, we don't put flowers on in cemeteries
No, you
because
wear it. You wear it. It's a
you
paper flower.
yeah, you can wear the poppies. Yeah. They're definitely associated with. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again.